A hawker centre stall assistant who allegedly visited a KTV lounge over the weekend has tested positive for Covid-19. Starting from today, staff at all dine-in F&B outlets must undergo regular fast and easy testing. And practice makes perfect. The Red Lions are spotted making test jumps ahead of National Day. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman. Now you can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. The KTV cluster continues to grow with 33 more cases confirmed today. This brings the total number of cases for the cluster to 87, making it one of Singapore's largest active clusters. Now, in total, Singapore reported 42 local COVID-19 cases today. 17 were linked to previous cases and quarantined, while 20 were linked and detected through surveillance. The remaining 5 cases are currently unlinked. 6 imported cases were also confirmed today, with 4 detected when they arrived here and 2 developed the illness during their stay-home notice or isolation. More details will be shared tonight. Meanwhile, investigations are continuing into the KTV cluster. The Health Ministry said there is likely ongoing transmission at more KTV lounges after cases of infection were confirmed among hostesses who had visited these clubs currently operating as F&B outlets. Well, let's recap the number of confirmed cases in this cluster over the last 4 days. Linked cases began popping up this week, with 4 on Monday, 8 on Tuesday, 42 yesterday and 33 today. That's a total of 87 cases, which makes it the second largest active cluster in Singapore after the one at 115 Bukit Merah View Market and Food Centre. Separately, the hawker centre at Block 75, Toa Payoh, Lorong 5 underwent deep cleaning this morning after a stall assistant who allegedly visited a KTV lounge over the weekend tested positive for the virus. The 36-stall hawker centre, managed by NTU Seafood Fair, will be closed until further notice, with more cleaning and disinfection to be carried out tomorrow. For a closer look, Professor Teo Yik Ying joins me now. He's the Dean of the Swee Hock School of Public Health at the National University of Singapore. Welcome back to the show, Professor. We've seen a few large clusters: Tan Tock Seng Hospital, Changi Airport, Bukit Merah View, and now the KTV lounges and clubs. Professor, in just 4 days, the number of cases in this cluster has risen to over 80. What's your assessment of this new cluster compared with the previous clusters? Now, given the setting, would it be more difficult to trace and ring-fence potential cases?
Thank you for having me back, although this is definitely a much more worrisome time than before. So we have seen how fast this cluster has grown, that within a matter of 4 days, since the first case was reported, we saw the number jump very quickly to 80 over cases. And clearly the number of KTV lounges that are involved goes beyond the initial 3 to potentially many more. And I think the problem is compounded when these hostesses move between different clubs and lounges. And it is likely that thorough investigations over the next few days will reveal how many KTV lounges and clubs are indeed involved. And I expect actually we will see this being reviewed over the next few days, just like how today we learned that another 4 venues are involved and have to be closed down. Now, I say that this is worrying because there's a real potential that this can grow very quickly to be the largest cluster in Singapore outside the migrant worker dormitories. And it is not just the adults that have been to these lounges and clubs, but potentially these people stay in households with spouses, children, even elderly parents. And the transmission risk to people within the same household is exceptionally high, given that we know the recent outbreaks in Singapore and Southeast Asia, which is where a number of these hostesses come from, are predominantly driven by the highly transmissible Delta variant. So what this means is that it is almost certain that someone who is infected and who stays in a household with other people will end up infecting others in the same household. And because of the clandestine and potentially illegal nature of some of the activities in these lounges, people are less willing to come forward to admit that they have been to these locations. And I also suspect that the mandatory safe entry and the use of Trace Together may actually have been neglected or even deliberately ignored. And this means that the records from this digital contact tracing methods will be incomplete. So the only option is to rely on manual contact tracing, which takes time and is also very difficult to be comprehensive. What is important is that we have seen how similar outbreaks happen in Taiwan, Thailand, Japan, and South Korea, and this have gone on to spark massive community transmissions. So this is certainly worrying, and I'm sure that every effort is now being put in to perform the necessary contact tracing and surveillance testing in the community. So I can only say that if you or anyone you know have been to these venues, please come forward to be tested, because I believe the last thing any person wants is to infect their family members, especially younger children or any elderly who have not received their vaccines yet and are thus at much higher risk of complications when they're infected with COVID-19.
Right. Professor, worrying, troubling, does the KTV cluster point to yet another weak link in our fight against COVID-19? Just like the explosion of cases in the migrant workers' dormitories and among the elderly in the Bukit Merah View cluster. And what could be other potential weak links, and how do we preempt possible clusters?
So Singapore has always adopted sector-specific safe management measures. So whether it is the food and beverage sector, the education sector, the sports sector, and in this instance, the nightlife sector. So every sector actually has the potential to be a weak link when safe management measures that were developed were not properly adhered to or were not properly enforced. So there are supposed to be regulations in place to disallow nightclub activities, including hostess services or any intermingling between patrons. So these KTV lounges are also supposed to have switched their operations to provide only food and beverages. But there appears to be a need for regular and stricter enforcement, given that there are outright breaches of some of these safe management rules. So this is where the Nightlife Business Association will now need actually to review the plans for reopening and to actually discuss with their members very openly and transparently, how do we avoid a repeat of this occurrence? Because otherwise, I expect this will complicate any further relaxation of restrictions for these clubs and lounges to permit future activities, at least within the short term. And we have always highlighted the need for sector-specific plans to permit safe reopening. So any sector, I would emphasize that any sector can be a weak link in our COVID-19 fight. When people start to ignore the rules and regulations or even blatantly break the law or rules that have been established. So what I see is that Singapore does have a very strong reputation for enforcing our laws and our regulations. And unfortunately, this is where we will need to rely on very strict enforcement in order to make sure that we do not see a repeat of this, whether it is in the nightlife sector, the clubs, or in other sectors where there may be future weak links.
Health Minister Ong Ye Kung also said, Professor, it was disappointing that this new cluster had happened. Let's have a listen.
While this is disappointed, we also are not entirely surprised that clusters like this will pop up. Over the past weeks, we saw the Changi cluster, and then Bukit Merah cluster, and now KTV cluster. This is the nature of the Delta variant, a lot more transmissible. And so long as there are embers in the community, it is likely to then pop up and then infect many more people. So I think this is going to be a pattern that we need to manage.
Professor, let's look forward. Does this mean that Singapore's reopening plans from the week of July 26th will not be derailed?
So Minister Ong is being very pragmatic to say that such clusters will pop up, especially as Singapore moves towards eventually living with COVID. And I think it's also important to highlight that as more and more people in the country get vaccinated, the vaccine is working well to protect us from symptomatic infection. So there will be many more people who may have been infected, but may not even know that they are infected themselves because they have no symptoms, or they are just mildly symptomatic. But with more people being vaccinated, actually Singapore remains to be in a better position to relax our restrictions. Now, of course, we want to do this when case numbers in the country remain as low as possible. But I think the reality of living with COVID also means that we will start to see infections happen in the community and clusters may grow in size, like what we have here. But because almost everyone who is infected would ideally have been vaccinated already, they are protected from any short-term or long-term damage to their health. And a large number of infected people in the community does not translate to an increasing number of people who need treatment or hospital care. So I won't make any prediction on whether the reopening plans will continue as scheduled or may be delayed, but I would just say that Singapore is definitely in a much better position now than, say, 6 months ago. Right now, we have around 40% of our population to be fully vaccinated and another 30% having received at least one dose of the vaccine. So that's 70% of the people in Singapore having some degree of protection against severe complications if they are infected with COVID-19. So while we have said that, I think what we need to do, at least over the next week or so, is that we have to monitor very carefully whether household transmissions are happening and young schooling children are now infected because of adults at home who may have gone to these KTV lounges. The reason is we have a large population of children that are below the age of 12 that have not been eligible for vaccination yet. So they remain at higher risk of severe complications if they are infected. And if that really happens, then I think we must not hesitate to impose stricter restrictions overall in the country to continue protecting the groups that have not been vaccinated. And this definitely includes children who have not been vaccinated, as well as some of the elderly who have not been vaccinated yet.
As always, Professor, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Professor Teo Yik Ying, Dean of NUS's Swee Hock School of Public Health. A PCF Sparkle Thoughts Centre in Choa Chu Kang is closed for 2 days for deep cleaning after 2 children from the same household tested positive for COVID-19. The Health Ministry informed the centre yesterday that a child from K1 had tested positive. A second child from playgroup was then confirmed with the virus this morning. Meanwhile, all children and staff from the playgroup to K2 classes who were recently in school with the affected children have been placed on leave of absence from yesterday to July 26th. The Health Ministry has clarified that the recent death of a 16-year-old boy was not linked to vaccination. In a Facebook post yesterday, MOH said it was aware of speculation in Facebook, Telegram and WhatsApp chat groups featuring an obituary that led to the conjecture that the teenager had died from a vaccine-related severe adverse event. MOH has said on July 7th that it is investigating the possible causes behind a 16-year-old boy suffering cardiac arrest after a strenuous session of weightlifting, with the vaccine being a possible factor. It's still unclear if these are separate incidents. Looking overseas, across the causeway, Malaysia reports over 13,000 new cases, a daily record for the 3rd straight day. Hospitals have been struggling to cope with the rising daily numbers of patients, and hotels are now used as quarantine and treatment centres for low-risk patients. Meanwhile, Indonesia passed a grim milestone, overtaking India in highest daily cases, reporting more than 54,000 cases yesterday. This up more than 10 times the number of infections at the start of last month. Indonesia is bracing itself for the outbreak to worsen as infections are spreading faster due to the more virulent Delta variant. And over in Thailand, it reported a daily record of 98 deaths today, risking becoming the next Seychelles as tourists return amid the COVID-19 outbreak. Tropical island paradises like Maldives and Seychelles have seen record surges in infections since opening borders, despite having vaccinated about 70% of their populations. Thailand may have to take the risk that an influx of international travellers could worsen the spread of the virus. Back home, Singapore is implementing some new measures to allow the economy to open up further and more activities to resume. As the multimedia journalist Kimberly Zhao explains what fast and easy testing is and how it works.
Staff at gyms, dine-in restaurants and massage establishments will have to undergo regular COVID-19 testing from today. All staff who work in places that welcome unmasked patrons are required to take a swab test every 2 weeks, regardless of immunization status. What does that entail exactly? We spoke to local bar Jigger and Pony, who were invited by Enterprise Singapore to do a beta test of the process and took their first tests last week.
I think the process has been quite smooth. So we've also come up with some SOPs amongst ourselves to kind of streamline the process. And I think generally everybody here has kind of taken quite well to it. The testing, I guess, everybody sees the need for it and understands the importance and probably the possibility of it carrying on for quite long after this. Personally, I also see the importance for having the test. I think it's a step to reopening, and if it means that there'll be more ease of restrictions by having more compliance with tests and any new measures, we'll be totally for it.
Businesses will implement fast and easy testing, or FET, using antigen rapid tests. These are self-administered, either at quick test centres or through the employer-supervised self-swab, where staff swab themselves under the supervision of a trained staff member. For Jigger and Pony, the staff do their testing at home with the supervision done via video conferencing.
The first thing we did was attend a set of training. We have to send a minimum of 2 supervisors per venue. We also received the test kits. As you know, the government is providing the first 3 months' worth of test kits. As a business owner, of course, there's also a little bit of stress. SMM measures has definitely impacted our revenue. And additionally, our costs have remained high. And of course, our landlords continue to demand rents. And even though there are government subsidies, they're not ongoing, and it's not our intention to survive based on handouts. There are also other business expenses, like you mentioned about FET tasting, safe entry measures that adds to our manpower costs. So we are very supportive because we want to get COVID behind us, and we want to make sure that we transition into the endemic new normal successfully. But I think definitely that's our hope, that this is not something that will continue to settle us as a business and as a community in the long run.
The rollout of the 14-day regular testing appears to have gone smoothly for this bar. While this is another measure to adhere to, there is the hope that this will spur the expansion of Singapore's reopening. Kimberly Zhao for the Straits Times.
In other non-COVID-19 news, residents in various heartland areas were treated to a parachuting display by the Red Lions today as they began freefall jumps to assess the suitability to skydive at those locations. Onlookers applauded as the skydivers descended with their signature red parachutes. The Red Lions are slated to make the jumps on August 7th and 8th. The second year they'll do so as part of the National Day Parade. Last year they landed near hospitals as a tribute to frontline workers. Meanwhile, during the Red Lions' second test jump, a member of the team was injured after a flag attached to him got caught in the grass as he was about to land during the second jump of the day. The Straits Times saw him take a hard fall forward and remain motionless on the ground. Medical staff who was on site quickly tended to the skydiver and placed a neck brace on him before he was stretchered off to an ambulance. Separately, a 39-year-old woman was arrested earlier today for her suspected involvement in the murder of a 51-year-old man at a home in Ang Mo Kio Avenue 3. Police said preliminary investigations showed that the pair knew each other. When officers arrived at the scene, both were found with multiple wounds. They were taken to hospital, but the man later succumbed to his injuries. The woman is warded for medical treatment and will be charged in court tomorrow with murder. If found guilty, she will face the death penalty. The Chief Information Officer at the Trade and Industry Ministry was fined $2,000 today after he pleaded guilty to a drink driving charge. Bernard Donald Miranda was also disqualified from driving all classes of vehicles for 2 years. In his mitigation today, he told the court that he had acted out of character, adding, quote, "I have done something wrong. It won't happen again." Our Thursday shows are never complete without checking in with our colleagues at Live. Let's begin with our food editor Tan Shue Yin, who has been diving into Sichuan flavors this week. Hi Shue. So what are some of your favorite dishes from Sichuan Alley at Teluk Air?
Well, I love the offal dishes there because they do it so well. Most of the time we take it for granted that people are going to clean the offal properly. And recently I had a really horrendous dish in another restaurant, and a friend of mine said, go to Sichuan Alley because they do it right. And they really do. So good. Okay, two of my favorite things there: large intestines, which are stuffed with leek, sliced, and then deep fried. And it's phenomenally crunchy. And the leek is sort of like a really aromatic counterpoint to the offal. And the other one that I like is beef tripe, which is pickled, lightly pickled. So it's a little bit spicy, a little bit tangy, and there's like thin slices of lemon, and there are bay leaves and star anise, and the springy texture of the tripe is so delicious. And there is just a little bit of heat, a little bit of numbing heat, but not too much. So it's really, really good.
Sure, with restrictions easing and bigger groups of up to 5 people now allowed to dine out, do you see the F&B sector picking up the pace again?
Yes. If the last couple of weeks have been anything to go by, people are madly making reservations for restaurant meals. It's back to the situation where a lot of restaurants where you want to go, you may not be able to get a table. I think when there was just 2 to dine, it was really difficult on many restaurants, especially Chinese restaurants, because you tend to want to eat in a bigger group in a Chinese restaurant, right? And so they did suffer quite a bit. So I'm hoping that for 5 to dine, more people will be sort of enticed to go out and eat and support the Singapore restaurant scene.
Thanks, Shue. That was food editor Tan Shue Yin. Well, starting from tomorrow till Sunday, the Festival by Baskers Academy of Arts is back as a virtual event this year. And it's putting the spotlight on upcoming artists and performances by multi-ethnic arts groups. Journalist To Wen Lee is with us right now. Wen Lee, hello. Tell us more about the new element in this year's festival.
Yes, so this year's festival, Baskariam 2021, will contain some traditional dance and music elements. So there will be a lineup of, Kathakali performances by disciples of a veteran performer, as well as, vocal and violin kachari performances of Carnatic music. What will be new this year, however, is a series spotlighting upcoming artists and also performances by multi-ethnic groups. There are 3 groups among them. Yin Harmony, which is a multi-ethnic music group, as well as the Singapore Chinese Dance Theatre and Sri Warisan Samsite Performing Arts. So yes, this will all be on YouTube. All you have to do is tune in, and 3 days of great lineup of dance and music.
Thanks, Wen Lee. That was journalist To Wen Lee. Now, if you're looking to start on a new Korean series, the medical drama Hospital Playlist is back on Netflix with the 2nd season. Well, it follows the personal and professional lives of 5 best friends from medical school who are now seasoned practicing surgeons working together at the same hospital. They then decided to form a band to connect outside of work. Here to tell us more is journalist Jan Lee. Hi, Jan. Jan, personally, I'm a huge fan of season 1. But tell us, to our viewers, what sets this series apart from other K-dramas?
So if you've never been to Hospital Playlist, if you've never, watched the first season, like this is a great time to start watching. It's about, I would say like a quarter or maybe like 1/3 through its through the second season. And it's such a wonderful, like healing, comfortable K-drama, because it's a K-drama that ultimately, right, there aren't any evil villains, they're just like these 5 friends and they love their work, they're very dedicated, and they are very, very good friends. They hang out with each other all the time, and it's just about their lives. So it's about how painful it can be, sometimes to work as a doctor, because you have to witness life and death, right? You have to witness being helpless and being unable to cure someone of their illness or disease. But there are also like really uplifting moments where somebody gets healed, somebody's cancer goes into remission, or somebody welcomes a new baby. So there are all these great things about the work aspect of the drama, and there's also, of course, the personal lives, their love lives, but also there's great music because of the band premise, right? So basically in the first season, a bunch of things happen that lead to the 5 friends coming to the hospital together and forming a band, which they used to do in college. They used to like play in a band in college for fun. And basically every single episode, there will be a song that is played by the band and performed in the series almost entirely in full. I would say actually most of the songs are performed in full by the actors themselves. So the actors actually went to pick up, the instruments, like the guitar or the bass, the keyboards, drums, and they sing. So it's really wonderful because usually the song ties into something that's happening that episode or reflects maybe a certain emotion that one of the characters is feeling. And it's also like a great contributor to the soundtrack. And it's just very nice because they do a lot of close-ups of their hands on the instruments, because they specially went to pick up the instruments, they specially went to master it. So the camera does give them a lot of like close-up and zoom-ins of them actually playing. And it's just, I really like it. I think it's a very nice touch, and it really shows you how devoted the actors are to doing their characters well.
Well, thank you so much, Jen, for that review. Now, if you're looking for a heartwarming series, that is Hospital Playlist on Netflix. The Friday pages in tomorrow's papers will have more weekend picks from my colleagues at Live. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and videos, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. See you tomorrow on The Big Story.